All right, welcome everyone to another interview here on Nerd of the Rings. We have a special guest with us, Jamie
Cool.
Wilson, who is the production manager of prosthetics from the Rings of Power, and he's also had quite a journey through Middle Earth even before that, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, Jamie, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. No worries at all.
So I always like my favorite question to ask folks at the very beginning of these interviews is how were you first introduced to Tolkien?
I suppose most people watching this would have said they read the books for years when they were a small child and reread them. And I was first introduced to Tolkien in Queenstown, New Zealand. I was here from the UK visiting, and we ran into the rather large Lord of the Rings film crew. And that was my first introduction to Tolkien. I honestly, hand on heart, have to say I read the books after working for 2 months on the production and not having a clue as to what was going on and what order, because everything's filmed out of order.
Right.
So I had to read them. Sorry, fans out there. I'm not a diehard book reader 1,000 times before I got involved. Sorry.
Well, hey, that's totally okay. I've told folks on here they're always surprised to hear that I was actually introduced through the films as well. I didn't read any of them until after I saw Two Towers in theaters and immediately went out and bought the books after that. So you're in good company here.
Well, I'm impressed. It was I was impressed. It was the second movie you rushed out to buy the book. So good on you. There you go. That's
yeah, I saw the first one. I didn't even see the first one in theaters. I saw it on DVD, and then a couple months later saw Two Towers in the theater, and I was like, okay, I've got to find out more. I cannot wait a whole nother year before finding out what happens in Return of the King.
Yeah, fair enough. We
So
like to tease people off for a year.
That's right. So we kind of teased it there, but Rings of Power obviously is not your first trip to Middle Earth. And you kind of touched on it, but how did your journey in Tolkien's world begin all those years ago?
Well, literally, it's all years ago because it's over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
As I said, I was visiting relatives. I'm from the UK. I was visiting relatives here and doing the Tiki tour, our little van, and we were going around with my mate, driving around and freedom camping around New Zealand, and ran into the Lord of the Rings film crew. And that was in 1999. And we thought it'd be fun to be an extras dresser, which is basically cannon fodder in the film industry. The locals are hired in to dress all the extras, doing crazy early starts and late finishes, undressing them, and then redoing it all over again the next day. So we did that. We were going to do that for a week, and then we were going to escape and just add it to our list of fun things we'd done. And basically, yeah, on day one, I stupidly put up my hand because I'm a logistics man and also slightly OCD, and said, guys, I think you can organize this better. And that was the beginning of the end of now 20 years. So yes, so that's how I ended up in it. And who thought I'd be worrying about orcs armor, hobbit feet, elf ears 20 years later, but I still am.
Wow. So you kind of literally just walked onto walked into this. It fell.
It was, I was only supposed to do a week, and then we were gone and heading off around the country again. And then basically, yeah, it was on and off for 3-4 years, and then came out permanently and did the whole Lord of the Rings, and then on to the Hobbit Trilogy, and various other movies in between, and obviously now the latest production, Rings of Power.
Wow, that's crazy. So, so last week I actually spoke with some of the folks who were back there all those years ago with you. I talked to some of the wonderful orc actors that we have from Rings of Power. So I talked to Jed, Phil, Luke, and Robert. And one of the many things we touched on in that interview was the advance in the prosthetics technology since those early days on Lord of the Rings. And because I brought up the fact to Jed in particular, like I seeing him in previous adaptations, you know, I felt like his characters seemed more expressive than they had before. So can you tell us a bit about how far prosthetics have come since those early days in Lord of the Rings?
Sure. I mean, the biggest changes from Lord of the Rings to now, there has been quite a few years. The technology we're currently using has been in the industry. So there hasn't been a dramatic change over the last few years. But if you go back to 99, everything was predominantly foam latex. So foam latex is a great product. I mean, it works. You can create and sculpt and do all your characters and creations you want. But it's basically like a kind of like a sponge with a skin, I guess is the way to describe it.
Okay.
It's quite light. It bends and moves, and it's great for slip-on limbs and arms because it's lightweight and bendy, so that's all good. But at the same time, it's very dead. It's like a flat dead surface, so you have to heavy paint it, and it doesn't give you that translucency that real skin has. And then just towards the end of the Lord of the Rings filming, technology was out and had been used by other people, but not on a mass production as such. We moved into encapsulated silicon. So actually Gimli from Lord of the Rings was the very first character that we did in encapsulated silicon to lighten his full face prosthetic and give him more movement. So that actually transitioned in while doing the trilogy. And that's now been developed more and sort of, finessed. And that's what we now have, which is encapsulated silicon, which is a bit like 2 layers of silicon with a kind of jelly lighter silicon kind of in the middle is the only way to describe it. And the beauty of that is it is like human skin, as it is one, you can tint it, so you can actually make the actual translucent silicon kind of to match the skin color of the person or character you want. And 2, it has that translucency, so a bit like when you're in the park and you can kind of see the sun through someone's ear through the skin. That's what I mean by translucency. It's the fact it lets light come through, so it also means you do a much lighter paint work on it, and it is far more like skin. So that's really the change. So, and also you don't have to put it on so thick if you don't need to for the character look, and also it warms to the body, and also therefore sort of adheres and molds itself to the body more, and therefore that allows for more expression and movement by the character who's wearing it. So that's probably the biggest change.
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. So does that also factor into how much time it takes to make someone up?
No.
Is that no? Is it?
No, not really. And some would argue that silicon is harder for the application process than foam latex. Also, silicon tends to be a one-time use only. Foam latex, you can get away with a couple of rinse and repeats if you're careful when you remove it. So no, there are complications to the benefits. For its volume, obviously, it's heavier. So if you've got a very bulky kind of, good for the look, you end up adding a lot more weight than you do with foam latex. But on the flip side, if you get it right, it can give you a much better performance for the actor and let his face shine through, which was part of what was the sort of ethos from the beginning of Rings of Power, was the fact that we wanted the actors' sort of faces and performance to come through the prosthetics, keep everything as live and real as possible, just rather than a CGI fest. So it was trying to make it as live as possible, let the actors act through their prosthetics.
Yeah, and I think that's come across really well. A lot of folks I've talked to are kind of touting the orcs in the especially that we see in this show. As we heard a lot of fun stories from the guys last week. Now thinking about all the different races combined, because it's not just orcs here, but you've got elf ears, hobbit feet, dwarf noses, all those things. Is it a similar situation where like the materials and everything that you use in those have advanced the same as well? Like, is it all kind of the same thing, or are there any changes there from the Lord of the Rings days?
Well, the biggest one is the foam latex move to silicon. So we used to use foam latex for the facial prosthetics and for the body suits. By that I mean slip-on arms and legs and things like that. As far as the ears, if you're looking at elf ears and stuff, they used to be what we used to nickname the chiglets, which used to be gel little ear tips that went on the top. That was what we used to have back in the day, as well as some silicon ears, but that's all now fully silicon. And obviously a lot of, I suppose what you might say is, since Lord of the Rings, things have changed. Probably in the last 10 years, we've been using, or more, we've been using silicon-based, but Weta Workshop, who designed and created all the prosthetics, has obviously finessed it as the years have gone by. You've done a production going, oh, we should just tweak it that way. Then they've added that tweak in, so it gets better and better every time.
Yeah.
So they really have got it down pat now as to what works. And then also there are some, I suppose, what you might call design processes in it, whereby you have to consider your volume of output, how many molds, how many need to be made in a week, because that does also affect how you can make things. because you need that speed of turnaround. And we were literally chugging out thousands and thousands of these, what we call small prosthetics, ears, noses, and things like that. So there was an awful lot of molds, the cast is quite extensive. And all of them with their own hero prescribed ears and noses. So it was a pretty massive project. But so that hasn't changed so much really, but it's all about learning that the fact that when you build the original sculpt for the actor, looking at how like various lines on the ears align with the upper jawline, the lower jawline, things like this, so it makes it feel more natural. You'd be very surprised. People look very different, but actually, if you actually look at people's ears and noses, there's a lot of familiarities to the rest of their face and how it lines up. So we work very carefully on that to make it feel as natural as possible, and not like we just gone to the toy store and bought a set of ears and bunged it on an actor. So there was a lot of work went into that. Not only, the improvements of the technology maybe, or the finessing, but also actually the sculpt work to make it look as seamless and sort of natural to that. At the end of the day, we're not used to seeing people with pointy ears. So yes, everyone would go, there must be something stuck on, but at the same time, we wanted to make the stick on look as correct as possible.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned thousands of pieces. Do you have a ballpark idea of how many pieces of prosthetics you guys went through to make season 1 of the show?
Strange enough, you'd have to ask the behind the scenes team, because I did do up a stats report.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Our total manufacture. Now you've got me on the spot. I'd have to look that up. I don't know exactly off the top of my head what it is.
Yeah. Okay. But I was just curious. I threw that in there.
It is literally thousands and thousands.
Wow.
I mean, I think elf ears. I think we were up to somewhere in the region. I want to say somewhere in the region about 10,000 ears were made.
Gosh. Wow.
Now that sounds like a lot, but you've got to remember we were filming for 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
And you've got an extras day of 200, and there you are. That's 400 ears for one day shoot, and you've got so it does add up. But at the same time, there was a lot, but it does add up pretty quick.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about orcs. So one of the more intriguing characters of the show, from both character and design perspective, has been Adar. So he's corrupted elf and seems to be somewhere between elf and orc. Like he calls himself an orc, but he looks like an elf. He's got black blood though. So like he's this weird, kind of in between, this father figure for the orcs. So what can you tell us about the process of creating the look for that character?
First off, we wanted to make sure the actor's performance could come through, because obviously it's key, particularly in that role. I mean, there's a lot of dialogue, there's sort of emotion and undertones and things that need to come through. So that was the first thing. Secondly, it was very much a joint effort between ourselves and the prosthetic department. My prosthetic artist, Dan Perry, who applied the prosthetic, and Jane O'Kane from the makeup department, who obviously did the wigs and hair, and then between them did the kind of sort of skin coloration and highlighting the sort of veins and stuff. So it was a whole joint effort. The main thing was they wanted, it's not a crossbreed, it's more of like an elf who's turned. I mean, to quote another horrible franchise, he's gone to the dark side. So it was also about the balance that they didn't want it just turning into a beastie, because they wanted it more that he's actually more elf, and that makes it more sinister, that there's this slight turn, and what does the future hold, and will there be other more turn, so it opens up questions. If we go into full kind of elf beastie, then that would be too much. This actually I felt was far more sinister, because you're like, well, something's wrong, that's not right, where's this going to go, what's it going to lead to? So a lot of work was done on that. So there was endless tests and stuff, add this on, oh no, too much, take it down, no, too little, add it back in a bit more, and so he does actually have cheekbone pieces, upper cheekbone pieces, and he does have ears, and then most of the rest is coloration and wig and stuff. So it is sort of to intensify his face, but actually not pop it too far that it becomes more beastie. So yes, it was quite a hard job, that one.
So what has been, of all the work you've done on Rings of Power, what's been your favorite prosthetics work?
Well, I think for me, and I'm not singling anyone out, because, I do love my orc boys, Jed, all those that you spoke to. But I think the one that really got me for this production on Rings of Power was Luke Hawker. Some of the
Yeah.
walks we did on him, just it's it's multiple layers. It's not, I can't just hold up our prosthetic and woo, everyone goes, there is the actor underneath, there's the prosthetic on top, then you've got the costuming, then you've got the armor and weapons, then you've got the props, then you've got the set. So there's all these departments adding to it. But he came out on set, and also I think some of our contact lenses with the total play against the skin color, and the fact we've gone with a different skin palette for this production. It was very much lighter. They've been hiding away in the tunnels, so it was more pasty colored. They were kind of skinnier orcs because in the previous trilogies, it was a time when they'd been bred for battle. This is what I think a lot of people have forgotten. They were bred and basically marched out to fight. We're before that, so they've had the big fight. They've basically all died. Now they've been hiding away. So it was more that kind of slightly ratty, slightly newborn baby child coming out. They're burning in the sun. Their skin is pasty. It's that kind of thing. They're not all muscly yet. So that was great fun with that. And then he came onto set with one of his looks, and he's a funny performer. He's I guess a joker comedian as a normal person. He's a great guy. So he's sort of messing around, slightly childlike, funny in the look, and then he turned on his performance and he turned to us and went into full orc with his piercing lenses. And it was just like, oh my God. So that blew us all away. That day really was like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is some cool stuff. So I think he would be my favorite character. And that's everything, as I say, all the layers and his performance. And just that moment he changed from this like childlike messing around to this full-on
so this is Luke here that
is Luke.
This is the character you're talking about?
It's one of his looks. He has several. There's more of a yellowy one, which unfortunately I don't know if you'll have the picture of.
I don't think I have that one. Yeah,
and he has the very different contact lenses, like it's a contrast, and it really stands. So his eyes eat through you as he's performing. It's amazing. So, but yeah, so that's probably one of my favorites. But that's maybe because it's prosthetics heavy. So yes, but if you're actually to ask me maybe which cast member and overall performance, then I'd have to go with Durin and Owain Arthur.
Yeah.
He just blew me when I saw him on the episode that we watched for the cast and crew screening. And I remember one day we were in the studio lot and he was walking in and this man was like a dwarf. And I say that in the nicest, kindest way.
Oh, the dwarves are awesome. You don't have to apologize about that.
No, I mean the actual actor who was walking across the studio lot, and I was like, my God, that's a dwarf. Owain is a dwarf. He's in another life. He was there because he was this fun, Welsh, jovial, comical, burly kind of man, amazing guy, the nicest guy ever. And I was like, wow, this, and then his performance, he was a dwarf in a former life, guarantee it.
Absolutely. Yeah. As I've said, I feel like Durin is like the beating heart of the show. Absolutely love that character. So we talked about the sheer quantity and the, amount of work that went into all this prosthetics for the show. How many people are on your prosthetics team? How many people does it take to pull off a production like season 1 of Rings of Power?
Well, I mean, it depends. You might say it's not as big as you think, but then on the flip side, there's various different levels. So, I mean, you start at the manufacturing side, which is where the workshop, and they're obviously designing and producing and molding all the ears and pieces for the facial prosthetics. So you're probably talking maybe 80 people on that full time doing the prosthetics, but also building armor and weapons and props for the department. So, I mean, there's probably maybe 10 people dedicated to prosthetics alone. Then you've got the actual on-set team who are then obviously applying those and looking after them. And there's two parts of the team. There's those that apply the hero prosthetics, and there's a whole other team that look after the background characters in the prosthetics world. So that is slip-on masks, limbs and arms, and hobbit feet, obviously. There are a lot of them. And they have to pull those on. So you're probably looking at a team of around 18 or so on the application side, and you're probably looking at a team ranging from 20 to 30 on the sort of extras looking after side of things. And on top of that, obviously, you've got sort of, maybe similar or slightly smaller costume team that's putting their layer on and the armor on top of that. And then you've got another team of props people handing out the props. And then you've got the set decorators and art department running around putting those all out. So there's, it adds up.
It's a busy area to be in.
Yes, as quite often the crew would outnumber the number of actual sort of orcs or race that was on
Right.
screen, just because there's so many layers involved. That's what happens.
Yeah. Now, turning back the clock a little bit, so you had a kind of a little bit of a different role for the Hobbit trilogy. You were the armor and weapons production manager. So I'm curious to hear a bit about your time doing that, and I was also curious what your favorite piece of work to come out of those films was in that role.
Yes, so I looked after our members. I also looked after daily running of prosthetics on that as well. So I
Oh,
had both.
really? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know
So,
that.
yeah. So armor weapons, just so much of it. Literally offsite warehouse full, and my day consisted of 4 a.m. truck runs and bringing the stuff in for the day because there was no space at the studio for the amount of stuff we had. So we kind of had offsite. We had to keep bringing it in, taking it out, crew arriving, putting it on, cleaning, repairing, back to storage, back in the next day. It was logistics basically. And there was very much like Lord of the Rings. We had huge amounts of armor, weapons, and props involved with that. And so for the same for the Hobbit trilogy, that was just loads of those. I would say possibly the Hobbit, was, it's not exaggerated, it's not the right word, but it was sort of softened slightly, lightened in style, if that makes sense. As in, it was, the Hobbit is a more of a child's book. It's it's not quite as hardcore as the original Lord of the Rings. So things were taken in a slightly more sort of soft. Everything was slightly increased in size and then made a little bit more exaggerated, I guess is the way to put it. But at the same time, there was all the regular races and they all needed their bits and stuff like that. So yeah, there was a lot of endless dead bodies of orcs. I mean, gosh, we had piles of blood-soaked orcs in armor on dummies on trolleys that were constantly in and out and slowly falling apart
Oh,
and
wow.
having to be patched up. So yes, so there was lots of that going on. As far as sort of favorite piece, I think the interesting thing that really changed between obviously the original trilogy and then you're talking about the Hobbit was
Yeah.
the need of the different styles and sizes of weapons. So if you take one actor, maybe a lead actor, that has like Bilbo or someone like that, or maybe Gandalf, we had to make things in all the different sizes. You'd have the actor scale, you'd have the
Right.
large scale. So when they needed to be larger than maybe a little hobbit next to them, so you had a bigger version. Then you might have gone 3/4 scale. Then you had the VFX, which was just the hilt of the sword and then a little bit of green and the rest was cut off. You then had
Yeah.
the stunt aluminium light fighting. You then had the stunt rubber. You then had the stunt green. It was literally every weapon needed
Wow.
about 8 different variants. So we did do some of that in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, but it definitely ramped up to the full. So basically in Lord of the Rings, we were kind of producing it as it was required, and everyone's like, oh, now we need a VFX version. Now we need this. So we were literally constantly making, but when we started The Hobbit, we knew this was going to come along. So we kind of went, right, Gandalf, 8 different staffs in all the different formations, Bilbo's a sting, 8 different versions and all the, so we knew that from the beginning. So there were boxes and boxes. So that was, I had this massive container full of hero weapons, and that was kind of the most interesting part, just literally all the different versions from normal, ginormous, mini, green, stunt, element. It was crazy. Yeah.
That's a good thing that you are a very organized person, I must say, because that
OC,
sounds
OCD
daunting.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think it's kind of funny that it's kind of crazy to think that you guys made these as they popped up being needed on Lord of the Rings and kind of discovered along the way too.
Well, I mean, it was, I think, I don't know if it was the first or definitely was one of the first trilogies all filmed at once on
Oh
this
yeah,
scale. And for New Zealand, it was the biggest thing we'd ever done. And for a
absolutely.
lot of people in the whole industry, it was the biggest thing that's ever been done. So it was a big
Yeah.
learning curve. But, it's Kiwi ingenuity, number 8 wire. It'll be all
Yep.
right. We'll fix it. Don't you worry. And yeah, oh, you want another sword in 2 hours? Sure, no problem. So there was you might say there was a certain amount of cutting things off and putting a bit of green tape on at the last minute, and quickly we'll make a brand new one in the next 24 hours. But we've got this one for now. So there was a fair bit of that going on, I would guess. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Um, Now I'm curious. We're getting short on time here, so I'm gonna give you some quicker rapid fire kind of
Oh,
questions here. You don't have to be. That's just to say you don't
I
have
have a
to
buzzer. No,
expand a ton if you don't want to.
that's
You
I'll
can
keep it
expand
short.
as much as you want. It's totally
Okay.
up to you. Um, So who is your favorite character in the Rings of Power?
Well, I think I've blown that already. It
Yeah.
depends. It's either Durin for an overall character, the environment he's in, the costume and everything, just the look was on point, or from my own heart in my department, then it was those orcs, and in particular
Yeah.
one look that Luke had that really blew me away with those contact lenses.
Well, you're getting some brownie points from the orc guys today, that's for sure.
I keep seeing them, so I got to protect myself, otherwise
That's
I'll be
right.
yeah.
Yeah, that Jet. I mean, you gotta feed
Oh,
his ego once in a while.
God bless Jed. I don't know why he does it to himself, but he is the nicest man, and he keeps rolling out to do these punishing work. And I'm just like, man, you must be by now. No more thanks. I'm done. But yeah, he loves it. So God bless him.
Now, who is your favorite Tolkien character?
I would think I'm going to have to say Gandalf, and maybe that's a bit boring, but I still
Good answer.
Still chuckles me to this day that they carry the ring all the way to Mount Doom. They drop it in, and then Gandalf sends in the Uber Eagles to pick them up. I mean, why didn't they just fly on an eagle all the way there? But I know God will it'll upset the hardcores out there.
I was gonna say you drop that 2 minutes before we're scheduled to wrap up this interview, and it makes me want to go on for the next hour to tell you exactly why, Jamie.
Every episode has a cliffhanger, so there you go. You got to end on a bang. So I liked him, one, because his character, two, he was an amazing actor and a lovely man. And I don't know. It's one of those things, when you get a character, I'm not sure who else could ever play it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you actually think, well, who else might be? I just don't know if any. I'm sure there would have been someone who could have done it. We're not, we're all replaceable, but he is just so embedded into that, I just don't know who else would. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, which is your favorite Tolkien book?
Oh, well, considering I read all 3 books in 2 weeks flat, staying up all night long. They
kind of blend together, I would imagine.
Yes, they do. And the fact that we were shooting everything out of order, all 3 books. Once we were in a location, we shot everything we needed for. So yes, I mean, I know the books, I've read them, but then my whole brain is scrambled as to the order. Like now, I couldn't even tell you the order because we filmed totally in a different order. So I'm a bit of a mess. So I don't really have a favorite as far as.
So which I'll do it this way. Which is your favorite of the films?
I like the first one for the scene setting and everything like that. I like the third one for the epicness. I mean, I say epicness. The reason when we did one of the big battles, 2 things. Sorry to extend this out.
Good.
2 little stories. When we did the big battles, one day we had 600 extras on set. Now that was back in 2000 or whatever it was. Now that's a large number of extras, and we started at 2 a.m. to get them all ready. And a large group of those were Rohan horse riders and all sorts. Now you go to modern days filming, and I think the largest extras day we might have had would probably be about 60. So it's quite different times. There's a lot more work can go into multiplying. It doesn't make sense to have that many extras anymore. So there was that. So that made it kind of, epic. And then also Minas Tirith, the battle. I will to this day never forget the moment when they catapulted real life fireballs over the set, into the set, burning straw thing. They were massive. They're bigger than me. I mean, they're taller than massive than me. And then them rolling down the streets, and then stunties in uniform running out of the way. Literally, it was real life. It was amazing. So, that to me. So therefore, possibly the third movie. And is that because of the movie, the book, or just those moments, those mega moments that are in it?
Yeah,
probably that. But that for me would be, probably the one.
That's a great answer. So where in Middle Earth would you most like to visit?
Well, this is also a cheat, I'm afraid to say, because we shot the Rohan settlement, which was on this. Now should I be talking Rings of Power? I'm going to get in trouble from the bosses now. But I'm going to talk 2. I'm going to quickly go Lord of the Rings, and I'm quickly go Rings of Power, so I cover both areas. So Lord of the Rings was the Rohan settlement. It was on this little knobby hilltop in this flat valley that was surrounded by mountains. And it's in a place near Methven in the South Island of New Zealand. The set was so cool anyway, and it was on this knobby little thing, little track getting up there and stuff. But then overnight, one night, it snowed. And when I say snow, it heavily snowed to the point we weren't sure we could get to set. We made it to set, and there was like this, what you might call Christmas card, is it like Hallmark movie kind of moment? The entire set was beautifully covered in snow. It looked so gorgeous as we drove in, and it was like this ring of mountains and there's one way in, and there in the middle was this set on top of this little lumpy outcrop. So I remember that. So that would be where I'd want to go. The irony of that was we didn't want snow, so then the next 6 hours was people with diesel heaters trying to melt the snow off the set so that we could film it. So that was that. Then when you get to Rings of Power and the current production, where would I like to go? I don't know. There's a little bit when some of the opening scenes and stuff where you're dealing with the hobbits and those rolling New Zealand hills and the beautiful flowers. That kind of has a thing, I guess. One, because I love New Zealand, even though I'm British. I live here; it's my home. Two, because it kind of had a link back to Lord of the Rings and that kind of big scenery stuff. But secretly, because Lord of the Rings didn't have it, I would like to go to Numenor. So when we did Ring, obviously it was destroyed and it wasn't there, and now we're seeing it come to life. So that was really exciting to see, and the sets that were built and everything for that, it was so cool to see that. We kind of knew about it, but we didn't get to see it, and now we get to see it. So back in the day, it was just a pair of Argonath with their hands out, out over the sea, and that was it. And now we're actually getting a full city, so that's pretty cool in this new production.
Indeed. All right. So final question.
Oh yeah.
If you were placed in Middle Earth, what race of being would you be?
Well, I nearly was a race. So they wanted me to be the wood chopping orcs, which basically was me in a loincloth.
Really?
Yes. I declined, I hasten to add, but that I was heavily pressurized into being the fact that I should be that. That was in Lord of the Rings when we did that originally in '99. Peter and the directors and the producers were quite keen that I should be of a fitting character to do that. I declined when I saw the look, the 2D design. I was like, nah, sorry, not to do that. And then in the Rings of Power, what I'd like to be there, well, I think it would have to be a dwarf, because to be in the mines there in their full glory with the sun reflecting mirrors, the gardens, the waterfalls, compared once again to what we saw back in the original trilogy, the sort of ruins and destroyedness. I'd love to see it in its full glory and working and the mining and everything else. I think that'd be pretty cool. And I think I'm kind of fitting a dwarven style, if anything. I ain't no elf, I'll tell you that.
That's what I tell people all the time on this channel when they ask me. I say, I am not the physique for an elf. I fully acknowledge that I am much more suited for a dwarf.
You could potentially be a hobbit. It would depend on your height. I can't be at 6'4". I definitely can't be a hobbit. So there you go.
Well, I could pull off. I'm not terribly tall, but virtually nobody knows. That's the fun part.
Oh, sorry, that's right. I'm ruining. I'm ruining.
You're ruining the mystique. Well, Jamie, thanks so much for joining us today and taking time out of your day to chat Middle Earth with us.
It's a pleasure. I'm sorry to have opened up the chasm that is Gandalf and his eagles. So
that'll be. I've promised the folks here that I will make a video dedicated to that topic. So that's just giving me more reason to do so. I'll send it your way so that you have it when the time comes.
He was just the creative Uber. It was just a few years later.
All right, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you again, Jamie, for joining us. Next Tuesday, we'll be back here with an exclusive sneak peek at the upcoming Return to Moria video game. So for all you dwarf fans like Jamie and myself, be sure to tune into that next week, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.